be attributed to the structure of bone, which some have compared to the reinforced concrete used to make buildings. One of the first steps in constructing a building is putting in place a frame containing long steel rods and then pouring cement around the rods. The ultimate result, a structure that is both strong and resilient. In much the same way, the spongy, mesh-like inner layer of bones provides resiliency, while the minerals that surround it, including calcium and phosphorus, provide strength. The outer layer of bone tissue, found primarily in the shaft of long bones like the femur or tibia, is known as compact or cortical bone. It consists of closely packed osteons, which are the fundamental functional units of most compact bones. It is the close packing of osteons that gives bone the appearance of being a solid mass. Osteons are roughly cylindrical structures, typically several millimeters long and about 0.2 of a millimeter in diameter. They are sometimes referred to as Haversian systems, named for Clopton Havers, the 17th century British physician who first observed and described these canal-like structures. The osteon consists of several components, including a central canal called the osteonic or Haversian canal. Inside this canal is a layer of connective tissue called the endosteum, which contains nerve fibers and blood vessels. Still other canals in the osteon, known as Volkmann's canals or perforating canals, connect the blood supply and nerves to the periosteum, which covers the surface of bones. Found within spaces of the osteon, known as lacunae, are mature bone cells called osteocytes. They are joined together by very narrow canals known as canaliculi in order to facilitate the distribution of nutrients and the elimination of waste. Canaliculi radiate outward like the spokes of a wheel. Surrounding the Haversian canal are concentric rings or lamellae of what's known as bone matrix, a combination of calcified intercellular ingredients. These ingredients include organic matter, chiefly collagen fibers, as well as inorganic matter in the form of what's called hydroxyapatite, which consists of crystals of calcium phosphate. It is the association of hydroxyapatite with collagen fibers that is responsible for the hardness of bone.
Alright guys, so I just want to reiterate. So I know in all the other connective tissues we talk about how the matrix makes up how elastic or how strong the actual connective tissue is. It's important to know that although we talk about collagen and elastic, we know that the cells also produce other proteins. Okay, we're not asking you to remember the names of proteins or anything like that. As long as you know collagen and elastic fibers, also known as elastin, made up of elastin, those are the two fibers, and then it has other proteins and other salts that will make it hard or soft. So with bone, they've just said, for example, that the collagen will make up the strength of that matrix, but as well as calcium phosphate. Okay, so often if it's a harder substance, there'll be a lot more salts in there to make that matrix harder. Does that make sense? Okay.
Filling the interior of the bone is trabecular bone, also known as cancellous or spongy bone. Trabecular bone is far lighter.
Okay guys, I know we touched on spongy bone the last time, but just to reiterate, compact bone on the outside, spongy bone, and then what do you think this yellow substance is? The marrow, yes. So you'll have red bone marrow here and yellow bone marrow here. This bone marrow will generally make your red blood cells, white blood cells, all of that. The yellow bone marrow will still make blood cells, but it will store fat as well as blood cells. So when you eat a soup bone, for example, and you eat that marrow inside, it will normally be quite a fatty substance, and that will be the fat and the yellow marrow. Okay. You don't really have to know the difference, but as long as you know that this is spongy and that's where the marrow gets made, or is based, then you'll be fine. Okay.
And more porous than compact bone. The difference in density is especially striking. Compact bone comprises 80% of the total bone mass of an adult skeleton, despite the fact that trabecular bone accounts for far more surface area. Trabecular bone does not contain osteons, is usually found at the end of long bones, and is normally surrounded by cortical bone. Trabecular bone is composed of a lattice or network of branching bone spicules, or trabeculae. The trabeculae are not penetrated by blood vessels, instead receiving their nutrition via diffusion from the endosteum, lining the bone marrow spaces between the trabeculae. While the arrangement of the trabeculae may appear to be random, it is not. The thickest and strongest trabeculae are arranged in the direction subjected to the greatest stress. It should be noted that bone tissue is formed and dissolved, a process known as remodeling or renewal, on a continuing basis. There are 3 types of cells found only in bone that play important roles in this process. Osteoclasts are large cells that dissolve bone by hollowing out a channel in the bone, a process known as resorption. Layers of bone-forming cells, known as osteoblasts, follow, laying down new bone along the sides of the channel. Finally, there are the osteocytes, which come from osteoblasts. Their job is to sense pressures or cracks in the bone and to help direct where osteoblasts will carry out the process of resorption. Ultimately, it is the balance between osteoclasts and osteoblasts that maintains bone tissue and makes bone homeostasis possible.
All right, guys, does that ring a bell? Okay. Yes.
But what about information?
So you'll see on the new presentation that's going to be uploaded, you'll have all of this. Okay, I'll show you now. So you'll have that, and then everything that we spoke about. Remember I said in that one, the highlighted words are going to be the words that you know. And then everything that I've actually described to you will be on these 2 slides over there. Okay, comfortable?
But not the fancy. Not all those other fancy.
Yes.
They won't work.
Just the ones that we're going to go over now. Alright guys, so let's just go over this quickly. Alright, the 2 types of tissue. 2 types of bone, what are they? Spongy and compact, okay. In terms of these little systems within the compact bone, what do you call them? Alright, and the little hole that goes through the middle of it? And what is in the canal? Blood vessels and nerves, okay? Remember that those reversion systems actually run completely down. So you'll remember at the beginning of the video they spoke about those steel rods and how you pack cement on them in terms of building and bricks and all of that. Essentially the reversion systems are going to run completely down as well, okay? The reversion canals, although they run in the middle of the reversion system, they will run out and connect throughout because you don't only have blood vessels and nerve vessels going straight down. Okay, does that make sense? Alright, then the little cavities that your bone cells are in, what are they called? Yes? Does everyone remember that? Okay, well I'll show you a picture now as well. Then the little passages connecting the lacuna to each other. Canalaculi, nice guys. And then the fact that the bone or the reversion system goes in concentric circles. What do you call those circles? Okay, and they're essentially, what are they? They're very similar to annual rings. What are they made up of?
Spongy bone?
No, they're the matrix. All right, so they're the matrix, and what makes this bone hard? and mineral salts. All right, so it would be the calcium phosphate. You just got to know mineral salts and the collagen. Okay, that makes it hard. Does that make sense, guys? I'm just going to show you a picture quickly, just to jog your memory. Yeah, let's maybe do this one. All right. So you guys are right. Spongy bone in the middle. We've got compact over here. Okay. Then we've got an aversion system. In the middle, we've got the blood vessels and the nerve. And then we've got the little, see here. For example, over here would be your, that would be your canal. You've got your little lacunae over here. And then you've got the canaliculi going across, linking them together. And then the concentric circles are your lamellae. All right, guys. It's just going to take a little bit getting used to the actual terminology. I think you're pretty good. Okay, comfortable. Okay. All right, so now we're going to start off on blood. Who can tell? Can anyone tell me anything about blood? Anything that they know?
It's red.
All right, that's a good start. Anyone else?
It has white blood cells and red blood cells.
All right. And what would the extracellular matrix be in blood?
Plasma.
Plasma, yes. Anything else? No. Any other facts, guys? Blood cell. I mean, red blood cells. What can you tell me about them? Okay. All right. Okay. Anything else? So what color is oxygenated blood versus deoxygenated blood?
Oxygenated is red.
And deoxygenated? Does everyone agree?
No.
Okay, what else could it be?
Isn't it darker red?
Darker red, yes. So that's a common misconception because in a lot of our drawings, our deoxygenated blood, we represent veins, and deoxygenated blood used by blue, whereas oxygenated we represent by red. That's not the case in real life. Oxygenated would be bright red, and deoxygenated blood would be a bit of a darker maroon type red. Okay, does that make sense? And that's got to do with the hemoglobin. All right, it will lighten up when we have oxygen with it. Okay, and darken it. Does everyone understand that? Okay. White blood cells, what do we need them for? Yes? Anything else? Alright, so we'll touch on that now as well, but yes.
Is it they can absorb bacteria instead of producing antibodies?
Yeah, so there'll be two methods of attacking bacteria and viruses and all of that, which we'll go through as well. Okay, but that's essentially what we've covered. Connective tissue, we know that connective tissue, we discussed with collagen and elastic and all of that. Do you think blood would be the same? No. All right, so this would be a fluid, the fluid connective tissue would be a little bit different. Okay.
Blood. 10 pints of life force, coursing through thousands of miles of arteries, veins, and capillaries. Those blood vessels carry blood to every other organ, keeping them functioning and thriving. Our red blood cells carry oxygen and nutrients. Our platelets stop bleeding and help to heal our wounds. Our white cells protect us against infection. And the yellow liquid plasma in which they are suspended carries an array of proteins that regulate bleeding and clotting.
Yeah, nice and short. Just a quick reminder of the three different
Our red blood cells make up 40% of our blood's volume. They're made continuously in the bone marrow.
All right, guys, so we're still working on our table. Now we'll obviously be on the blood section. So we've gone through the components of the blood. We know that it's a fluid connective tissue, and we know that there's essentially 3 cells there and the plasma. Okay. Why do you think the red blood cells are biconcave?
More surface area.
That's it, absolutely. Okay. And when we say biconcave, what does that mean?
On both sides.
Okay.
Sorry, what does it mean?
Biconcave. So bi as in both sides, and concave meaning. All right. So you'll see here that it's caved in, and that will be on both sides. Okay. All right. So if we look at our table here, we know that they biconcave. They have no nuclei, and they contain the pigment hemoglobin. Okay. Which we discussed in terms of carrying oxygen and not containing oxygen, or carrying oxygen and what the colors would be. All right, guys. It actually covers, what is quite interesting is that these red blood cells survive for 3 months. Are any of you diabetic or know anyone that's diabetic? All right?
I know my mom has it.
Okay, all right. And do you know how often they normally test their blood levels or their blood sugar levels?
Every morning.
Yeah.
All right? And if they go to the doctor, they'll look at a trend for what's happening to their red blood cells over a period of 3 months. Why do you think that is?
Because that's when the blood regenerates.
Absolutely. Okay. So just a quick little fact in terms of, for us, we know that now they last 3 months, but there's loads of purposes in terms of our everyday life where this is actually very relevant. Okay. All right, so that's red blood cells. White blood cells, we know that they help with immunity, which I'll touch on now as well. We chatted about antibodies, or they produce the antibodies or they take the bacteria in, okay, for example, which I'll show you there as well. And then platelets, they're actually fragments of red blood cells. I'll show you that as well. And then the main function here is to form blood clots to help minimize bleeding. I've got a really nice video to show you that process. Okay, and then plasma, we discussed that being the extracellular matrix, but it doesn't only contain those cells, they'll also have proteins and water and mineral salts and all of that within the bloodstream. Okay, so remember our extracellular matrix, although we talk about proteins, they often contain other things as well. All right. Okay, so when we talk about the formation of a blood clot, we generally think of a blood clot, but then also what forms on your skin if you scratch yourself. Okay, so we'll look at both of those. All right. Let me actually tell you first, then I'll take you through the video. So what's really nice about the platelets, and in the video you'll see it quite nicely, is they're actually, when you saw in the video, they didn't have any spikes on them. They were little round white cells, essentially represented in that video. What they do though is when there's a break in an artery or a capillary or anything like that, what will happen is the platelet will actually go to that area and stick to it. But what it actually does is it changes its shape. It goes from a smooth cell to this little star-like cell that actually grips onto the area to stop the blood flowing through. Okay. What it also then does is it attracts all the clotting factors to that region, and then what will happen is a scab will form and it will actually stop. Okay. I'll show you a nice video, but you'll see here that they actually, so this is the platelet over here, they'll actually sit there, but then they'll actually get, yes.
So now, when somebody, in movies and stuff, they say that the person's going to bleed out.
Yes.
Hated to doing that. How does that happen?
All right, so maybe it's too big of a cut. Maybe it's an area where they've lost a lot of blood too quickly. So for example, these arteries, you'll normally see like the jugular, they'll cut it, there's no ways that they can actually clot that area quick enough to stop the blood coming out. Okay. And then also in some cases they could actually have a condition. So for example, some people have very thick blood or they're at risk of, so I don't know if you've ever heard of atrial fibrillation. So what happens is the heart's not pumping as it should pump like this. And what happens is it almost vibrates instead of pumps. And what happens is in the atrium, the blood actually sits there for a bit. And instead of getting pumped out, it slowly goes out with the vibrations. And what's the risk of blood sitting? Can anyone guess? So remember, it's got all these platelets in it. It can clot. All right, so even if you have like a piece of meat, and there's some blood there, and you leave it out for a bit, it is going to coagulate. It gets almost slimy, right? Like a little bit jelly-like. That's coagulation, that's clotting. So what happens is if it's in your heart, and it's not pumping and it's sitting for a while, it starts to clot. And what happens is those people are at risk of heart attacks or strokes, because when that blood does go through, it's now got little clots, and it can go to your brain for a stroke, or it can go to your heart for a heart attack. So what happens is that some people, and it's actually quite a common medication, some people are actually on the likes of warfarin. And has anyone heard of warfarin before? So warfarin actually is an anti-clotting medicine, and it helps to keep the blood thin, which is great until you cut yourself, because then what happens is you tend to then bleed quite a lot. So if you don't have that balance right, it is dangerous as well. So then that might not work as well. Okay, yes?
Now, what's wrong with the platelets and the blood cells in someone with hemophilia?
All right, so philia means attracted to. So they've got a lot of red blood cells, if I'm not mistaken. I'd imagine, or excessive blood, right? Yeah. So that would also be, so they would probably need to be on anti-clotting medication. I'd have to come back to you.
With hemophilia?
Yeah.
So their blood doesn't clot. So
Oh, it's the other way around.
And when Nan explained about the smooth cells getting there and the clotting factors coming in,
Yes.
and this network that forms, they can't do that. There's a whole lot of enzymes.
Yeah, it's
Some
like a
different
cascade.
hematopoiesis are missing a different enzyme, and then they can't produce that network.
So they just bleed out. Is that what, like,
Yeah.
kids that cut, people that cut themselves, they just won't stop bleeding?
Yeah. So that could either be a genetic disorder, or it could be related to a whole bunch of other things, but it will normally be linked to one of the factors aren't working or something like that. So then they'll probably have to be put on clotting medication. So vitamin K, for example, helps with clotting, as well as obviously individual factors as well. So what will happen here is that the platelets will get there, the clotting factors will come, and they'll secrete fibers basically that will then cover the area and try to clot it up. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, let me show you a video.
Last video.
Even under physiological conditions, a small tear can appear in the wall of a blood vessel. In order to prevent blood loss, platelets and coagulation factors, such as the pivotal factor 10, acting in a coordinated manner, close this wound. The platelets are responsible for a first sealing of the tear. Then, a number of coagulation factors are
So they will
activated,
take shapes.
leading to the formation of fibrin strands which stabilize the growing clot. These
That's what you need to know. So it's basically what we told you, and that's really how it's formed. Any questions on that?
Yes. No, so the platelets change shape, then they secrete the fibers.
Oh. And they also bring the anti-clotting factors as well, which will also then help with the secretion of those. Okay.
Why do some people, like after surgery, get blood clots in their lungs?
All right, so that could also be, so for example, when you're in surgery, you're obviously under anesthetic, and they've actually slowed down your whole body process.